is that? All righty, good, 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 good. Morning, still morning. Happy Wednesday, happy Wednesday. All righty. We're still trying to review. I do want to do I'm in Canvas. I want to talk about energy flow real quick. Again, vocabulary, vocabulary, vocabulary. You need to know the terms producers and consumers. We need to look at the energy flow. I think we kind of looked at this. What I really want to give you, all right, let's see. All right, so we went through this yesterday, who's who and what's what as far as the organization of the environment is concerned. So make sure you take a look at that. We talked about the fact that there's an energy pyramid. Okay, everybody's still coming in. All right, but I want you to go through this page and look at the energy flow in an ecosystem. And while you're doing that, I'm going to get you a picture of a simplified study guide for these. Okay. All right, but make sure that you look at this page right here. So again, vocabulary, vocabulary, vocabulary. Primary producers. Only plants are producers. Only plants are producers. They are the only ones that can take the sun's energy and convert it into food. So that's what makes them producers. Okay, they can make their own food. So once they get that energy, they make their own food and then they use that food for energy for their functioning. Then we have consumers. Consumers cannot make their own food. All the animals are consumers because they do not make photosynthesize. Okay, if it does not photosynthesize, it is a consumer. All right, and then we have these three kinds of consumers. We have primary consumers, they're the ones that feed on the plants. We have secondary consumers, they're the ones that feed on the primary consumers. And we have tertiary consumers, which um, feed on the secondary consumers. We also have omnivores. So we have two kinds of omnivores and carnivores. Carnivores are meat eaters. Omnivores eat both plants and animals. Herbivores eat just plants. So those are three areas that words in addition to those that you need to be aware of. Omnivores eat both plants and animals. Carnivores eat only animals. And herbivores eat only plants. So again, vocabulary, vocabulary. And it goes, and they actually have higher than tertiary consumers, as you see here in the diagram. It just goes by the numbers 5, 4, and 5. Okay, but all the pyramids always start with primary producers. Okay, that's always the bottom. That's where the food starts. All food chains, all food webs start with the producers. Okay, that's something to remember. Um, let's see what else. Okay, we have two things going on. We have simplified relationships are in a food chain. So again, you start with a producer, and then it's who eats the grass, who eats the grass eaters, and so on and so forth. Okay. The food chain depends on the environment that they live in. So this first one you could say could be a grassy environment or a terrestrial environment. This food chain, second one here, is an aquatic environment. This is a food chain that would happen in the ocean. So your food chain is relative to the environment that you um, live in. And that's important. Remember, I told you that you're going to do a project when all this exam stuff is over. And I'm going to ask you to tell me about the food chain, the feeding relationship of the organisms in the ecosystem that you choose. So you'll be asked to look at that. Arrow always goes in the direction, there's not an arrow on here, but the arrow always, oh yeah, you can see little arrows on here, in the direction of what is eaten. It goes from what is eaten to who is doing the eating. So the arrow does not point down. In other words, you don't say the shark ate the dolphin. The arrow points up to say that the dolphin is eaten by the shark. Okay, so it's important because they ask you about the arrows, which one will have the arrows pointing in the right direction on a food web or food chain. So arrows tell you the direction of energy flow. That's the significance of the arrows. It represents the direction of energy flow. Energy is flowing from the dolphin to the shark, not the other way around. The energy is starting. And again, in the ocean, these are what we talked yesterday about phytoplankton. Those are the microscopic plants, algae, all of those would be plants on a small scale, and then they'd be eaten by the shrimp or the krill or whoever those little fellows are. Okay. All right. And again, this is in the ocean. So the 10% rule, know that the 10% rule, what the 10% rule is. I think we touched on it yesterday. The 10% rule means that as you go through, um, an organism eats something, and it eats 100% of it, but 90% of what they eat, they use for their body functions. You need energy to function. And so that only 10% is available for the next level, for the next thing that each that organism is only going to get 10% of the original energy that it had. And I think yesterday I showed you that if you looked at this one is a food. All right, I'm going to back up just for a second. Yesterday we looked at a pyramid and it showed you it started with 1,000 at the bottom and then it went to 100 and then it went to 10 and then to 1 or something like that. So the cheat sheet on knowing the 10% rule is to always drop a zero off of each one. And if I run into that, I'll show you again. The difference between a food chain and a food web. In, in the world, a food chain is simple. It says this one eats this one eats that one. But in the real world, there are several things that may feed on it. So a food web shows you all the possible feeding relationships that would happen in that environment. Okay, there's competition. Several organisms are going to try to be vying for the same resource. So a food web shows you all the possibilities in that particular ecosystem, as far as who's feeding on who. Okay, that's the difference. You got more choices. Keystone species, another vocabulary word. Keystone species are an organism found in the food web that has low numbers in relationship, that has an impact on the environment. Okay. In other words, and then the important part down here, they control the numbers of other species and help to maintain the structures. If we remove that keystone species, it upsets that whole ecosystem. That's why they're keystone. They're important. A lot of organisms probably feed on it. And when that one becomes missing, again, we're looking at the circle of life. Okay. I think earlier it mentioned the butterfly effect. One organism's presence or absence affects everything else. Okay. So that's what you have to keep in mind with keystone species, pyramids, species. All right. So what I would like for you to do is to finish reading over this page, um, do the matching, get your answers, and then do some more practice with the Georgia milestone thingy. Right. If you run into a particular topic that you are struggling with or you feel like you need more explanation, uh, please put it in the chat and I will pull it up and I will explain it. Okay. I am also available. Like I had 2 people come to tutorial yesterday. If you need something explained, this is a topic you just don't understand. Tutorial Tuesdays and Fridays, 1:30 to 2:15. Make yourself available. And again, I would do the practice study guide because it gives you answers. And it is important to look at the wrong answers as well as the right answers because it explains why it's a wrong answer. Okay. All right. So since this is the short class, this is supposed to be a review class anyway. I would like for you, and I hope that you're doing this. I hope that you're spending time with this tool. They went through a lot of trouble to make sure it was available to us. Again, this first column over here has all of the topics, everything that they are going to base the test on. This is it. So read through that. If you run into anything on here that you feel that needs further explanation, that's totally confused, and we're trying to get through, let's see, where were we today? And I'm going to come back to we have to cover evolution. This is the cell. So we've covered the cell. We know about bacteria. But again, read through this. We've done genetics. We need to talk about natural selection and survival of the fittest. So tomorrow, Friday for you all, I will spend some time with this section right here. All right, this refers to your macromolecules. So make sure you know about those. Right, and as you go through these questions, again, if there is a question that you still don't understand it, please point it out and I will try to give it more explanation. But again, the question is there, and then when you go to the next page, it tells you what the correct answer is, and why it is the correct answer, and then why the others are incorrect. So look at that. And again, I put out the disclaimer that these will just give you an idea of how they do the questions. and the kind of questions, but these are not the questions. So it is important that you study all of the aspects of the question because they could reword it differently when you see the test. All right, I'm going to stop talking and let you do what you need to do. I am going to have a gradable practice worksheet for next class because we do have to have a grade this week. So next class, you will have a worksheet that you will have to turn in, a review page. All right, good morning, Xander. We are in the Georgia Milestone Practice Test. All right, please use class time for classwork. You should be reviewing the milestone test. Got a lot of you just sitting there doing nothing. Everybody should be reviewing the milestone test. Like I said, next class, I'll actually have a written assignment that you will have to turn in. So review the test, please. Use class time for classwork. So with that one. All right, folks. Uh, yeah. Why was this an 8? And folks, we are coming up on the end. Like I said, use class time to do classwork. Pay attention when things are explained in class and turn stuff in on time so you're not losing points because the work is late. You want to make sure your grade is as good as it can be. Okay, so turn things in on time. Do the work when it's due. And we can pull these grades up. All right, it's time to go. You all have a great lunch, and I will see you on Friday. And we are going to do a worksheet on Friday that you will have to turn in.